Today's episode is brought to you by Proven Recruiting. As an agency, Proven has helped thousands of technology professionals find new opportunities at exciting companies across the United States. They focus on the quality over quantity approach in terms of building lasting relationships with both their candidates and clients. Today's episode is also brought to you by Golden Squirrel, where job matches are created by companies applying to you. Companies apply to you while ensuring their salary and benefits information matches your requirements before they interview you. Create a free profile today at goldensquirrel.io to get access to members-only employer data, as well as to unlock the opportunity for companies to apply to you. On today's episode, we have Luke Braud, the head of technology at Mosaic.tech. He has been in tech over the course of several decades and walks us through his experience today. I also wanted to mention that Kelly Feest will be our guest co-host for the next several episodes. She's the managing partner at Proven Recruiting and is going to add a unique perspective as we continue to extract information from hiring managers, VPs of engineering, and CTOs. So welcome her to the podcast, and with that, we'll get today's episode started. All right, welcome to another episode of Chasing Squirrels. On today's episode, we have Luke Braud, who is the head of technology for Mosaic.tech. Do you prefer we call it Mosaic.tech or Mosaic, or what do you call it?
We just call it Mosaic. Unfortunately, there's a lot of Mosaics out there, so we have to have something in there that differentiates us. But no, we just call it Mosaic.
Great. That sounds good. So from a 30,000 foot level, what is it that Mosaic does? And then we'll kind of dive into the weeds in a minute.
Yeah, so we talk about ourselves as being the real first strategic finance platform. And what does that really mean to call it a strategic finance platform? Really boils down to bringing all the data in from your key business systems, whether it's billing or ERP or CRM or HR, and actually pulling them together into a single source of truth so that both your finance team, but also your key business leaders across the org can actually finally get a true 360-degree view of your entire business and leverage that to actually make really strategic decisions based on actual data, and then a lot of the sophisticated financial modeling that we allow you to do with that.
So I imagine your primary customer within the organization would be CFOs, but then also I'm sure the CEOs and maybe investors would want the reports after they're generated. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Those are the primary ones, I think, at least for now. So definitely the CFO or sort of VP of finance, controllers, like the people that are really in charge of figuring out how to bring that data together and actually do both the financial reporting and analytics, but also, again, the forward-looking modeling and scenario building. And then, yes, to your point, after the fact, sort of sharing that information with other parts of the organization or investors is a key part of what we do. But longer term, and really exciting for me, is the idea that it's really, planning the future of a business is so much more than just finance. And obviously finance is a key aspect of it, but every department head actually plays a key role in being able to plan for the future of their org. And all of that rolls up into like really driving the future of the company. So marketing, sales, product development, eventually this platform, the Mosaic platform, is going to expand to really include the collaborative aspects of financial planning, which spread across the whole organization, and then all roll back up into a single view of the plan so that everybody across the org can really align around what that plan is and understand how it impacts them directly.
And stop trying to merge together 36 different hiring spreadsheets and needs that they have into one master.
Yeah, well, sounds like you've been there. Yeah, I mean, it's really true, and I always joke about it, but it's really true. Like, imagine a world where you've got a 30-person executive team, and the CFO is emailing hundreds of spreadsheets around, and everybody's downloading them and hitting save as and putting like their initials in V1, V2, and they're making a ton of changes, and then they're sending it back to the CFO, and the CFO is trying to figure out how to then merge all that back into one thing. I mean, it's an absolute disaster, right? But that's the reality of what most organizations are doing right now.
Yeah, and Luke, I think the three founders at Mosaic had that firsthand experience themselves, right? I mean, coming from their own CFO backgrounds and realizing the pain that can cause.
Yeah, great point. I totally forgot to mention that. Yeah, so the three founders collectively, they actually met at Palantir, another big company that's had a lot of success recently. But over the course of their three careers, they've spent, 40 plus years building, managing, running finance organizations, including, Palantir when they're growing from like 200 to 2,000 people or something in that range. So that was really the foundation actually of Mosaic, was this really in-depth understanding and real world experience in dealing with these problems. And actually that's one of the things that got me so excited about the company, both my experience in enterprise software and actually sort of already having seen the problem firsthand, but also just the incredible experience that the founders had and the passion that they have for solving the problem.
So I want to get a little bit more into Mosaic, but first I kind of want to backtrack about the previous experience you were kind of mentioning. So you've been in tech for a while, and you've been a leader in tech for a while. So I'm curious, kind of, you've also worked at larger companies and started smaller companies. So I'm kind of curious to walk through your journey of tech, essentially.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll try to go quickly because it is like, I just realized it's like 20 years at this point, which is crazy.
20 years and 20 seconds, go.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, my sort of passion for tech goes back to when I was a little kid. I'm sure, practically everybody who's in tech has some kind of a story like this, but, I was the sort of stereotype kid that was taking everything apart and breaking it and trying to put it back together and hopefully make it even better. And my dad was pretty unhappy about a lot of that because I broke so much of his stuff. But yeah, I got a real passion for technology through that, and then ended up getting into coding when I was like 6 or 7 years old because my older brother was doing it. And so just always been really excited about technology in really every form, not just coding. And also the other thing that was I just honestly was just lucky is I happened to grow up like right down the street from Netscape as Netscape was sort of exploding, and I was just sort of surrounded by that whole startup world. I mean, it was just everywhere in the Bay Area at that time. And so I did the math and computer science thing in college, but really always knew that startups were the place for me, where I could really just wear a ton of hats and have a lot of impact and not just touch the code, but actually be part of the design process and even work with customers directly and all that. So I jumped into the startup world at a company that is now called, well, I guess it's now called Oracle NetSuite, but originally when I joined, it was called NetLedger. It actually started with the idea of giving sort of like online accounting to millions of users and SMBs. And then obviously over the course of the 10 years I was there, sort of shifted more into a very enterprise-centric, very complicated ERP scenarios. And then over time, they ended up getting acquired by Oracle. So yeah, I mean, NetSuite, 10 years there, went from just sort of entry-level developer for the most part, just building features, and touched a lot of the product from analytics to the core infrastructure. Back when you had to build cloud infrastructure, those were the days you couldn't just fire up an AWS instance. So we were building it from scratch. And then kind of helped build out a lot of the different aspects of the product development team over there. And then interestingly, the thing that made me jump from NetSuite to my next big challenge, which is a company called Zuora, which is also still around, and is really focused on like the subscription economy, as they've coined it, which is more about obviously the recurring payments aspects. And the reason I did that actually was because I was at NetSuite. And I'd been there for about 10 years, and I was really actually starting to hear all kinds of noise about subscriptions. And traditional ERP systems, generally speaking, aren't very good at subscriptions. They're more about like transactional, like buy something, pay for it, ship it, done, right? Whereas subscriptions are sort of ongoing and constantly changing. And there's some really big challenges with respect to change management and revenue recognition and other things when you get into subscriptions. And we were actually hearing a ton of noise at NetSuite from our customers who were trying to get into subscription land, but didn't really have the right tools for it. And I heard about this company called Zuora, which was founded by a guy who actually built the billing system at the internal billing system at CRM that they used to do their billing and subscription management. And it was just instant, like, wow, this really is going to be the future of commerce. That was back in like 2010, actually. That was almost 10 years ago now. And so that got me to jump to Zuora, which I think Zuora and team, really the founder there really was right. I think that really was the future and sort of is the current now, really the subscription economy. So I think, spot on in that sense. And then, sorry, I'll try to wrap this up. I'm talking too much here, but and then I spent a few years there, and actually the role there was super interesting because I actually was doing a lot of traveling and spending a lot of time with sales, the enterprise sales team and the professional services team implementing. And I got a lot of exposure to how selling really happened and some of the challenges there with respect to the fact that they really had no tools, basically no tools to help them sell. You know, selling really is much more about relationships than it is about putting data into a CRM system. And so that kind of led to the idea, the seed of the idea for the startup that I founded with two other people called Heighten, which is really focused on building tools for salespeople that actually helped them sell. So a product that was really designed to work the way sales reps worked and really help them understand the relationships that they were building and the buyer journey, sort of what was happening on the buyer side as opposed to just on the seller side. And after a few years of working on that, we ended up getting acquired by LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a really, really popular product called Sales Navigator, which is a very salesperson centric, or sales team, I should say, sales team centric tool. And they were excited about the work we were doing and sort of fitting that in to their Sales Navigator product. So we were about 30 people. We got acquired by LinkedIn and went over there and implemented sort of re-implemented the product on LinkedIn stack and got that live there. So yeah,
I want to jump in real quick. So you worked in both the NetSuite and then the startup that got acquired by LinkedIn. And so in your current leadership style, what was it that you learned like from some of your great managers at NetSuite? And then you probably got a chance to implement it within the startup, or you might've gotten a chance to implement it in NetSuite. So I'm kind of curious how that worked and who did you learn from?
Yeah, great question. So obviously learned a ton in NetSuite, actually. I mean, there are a few, and Zora also, actually. I was talking to an investor the other day, and he made a kind of a smart comment about, how lucky I was to have worked with, some of these leaders like Evan and Zach and a guy named Dave Lipscomb at NetSuite, and then Teen. And there's just a whole list of these really amazing leaders that I've worked with. And so it's been incredibly lucky. Yeah, I mean, I think, the primary thing that I would say I've learned, because there's a million things obviously, but is the idea that, especially engineers, just to try to focus more on that right now, engineers, they get what motivates people. Like, how do you get a team motivated, and how do you make sure people are doing the best work of their lives? To use a bit of a cliche, but it really comes down to painting a picture of what are we really trying to achieve here, and how does that benefit the world in some way, right? And in enterprise software, it may just be like a finance team, or it may be an individual user. It could be something even bigger than that, but really tying the work and the vision and the code to some outcome that has a positive impact on people. And so, my leadership style sort of evolved over those years, and it wasn't this way when I first got into the startup world. I can tell you that it really did evolve as a result of all those great leaders. But it really boils down to being very outcome centric. It's like, hey, we're all here to solve some big, amazing, challenging, hard problem. Let's all get together and figure out how we're going to solve it. And then let's actually go deliver on it. And let's measure ourselves based on the outcome and the user or the customer. And let's not measure ourselves on the 100 tasks we did along the way or how many hours we worked, but let's measure ourselves on the outcome, and let's connect our awesome hard work to some incredible benefit that happened as a result of all that hard work. Versus again, the sort of the contrast being like the task oriented, like, here's the 10 things you need to do next week. Did you do the 10 things? Cool, you did the 10 things. Great, like next 10 things.
And I know that's big picture, right? Like you're not getting stuck in the granular.
Yeah, exactly. And making sure that you're actually being transparent and communicative with the team about how their work maps to those outcomes.
Totally.
I guess, so again, the difference being like, don't just tell people what to do, tell them what you're trying to achieve, and then kind of give them the tools they need to achieve that, and then get out of their way for the most. I mean, obviously I'm not literally completely out of their way, but generally speaking.
But honestly though, Luke, that is one thing that you've shared a lot with me, and we've done a great job being excited to tell candidates about, is how you do, it's not getting out of the way, but it's setting them up to succeed. But also, one thing I want you to reiterate or elaborate on is your mindset about setting people up to fail, to be okay to fail, is what I should say. Because I know that's something that's hard to harness, and kind of the trust that comes from that too.
Yeah, it is hard. And that's another thing, like, again, didn't just naturally happen for me. It took a lot of learning to get there. But yeah, it sort of goes along with the whole like outcome oriented thing, right? It's like, hey, if you're focused on outcomes, you're not focused on activities. Well, now all of a sudden you have to be looking at the big picture, and you have to give teams autonomy to actually go figure out, how do we go solve this problem? Because you're not giving us tasks, you're just giving us an outcome. So how do we go solve that? And that almost always involves, some level of failure is one of those terms these days that people kind of use in a lot of different ways. But there's always some failure involved in learning. Like, come up with anything hard you've ever done in your life that didn't involve some level, even if small, some level of failure. And then your ability to take the learnings from that failure, reapply it, and then actually go succeed. And I think that's incredibly important in any kind of product. Well, actually anywhere in the business, sales, marketing, product development, doesn't matter. But, I'm a big fan of sort of a lot of little failures in a way. I mean, it's kind of a crazy thing to say, but that's how we learn. And we structure our product development process, our software development lifecycle. We're a very agile shop. We structure it around really short, sprints, so that we can go spend a week or two really cranking on something. And most of the time it works out great, but the occasional time where it didn't, and you sort of make some mistakes or a failure, again, you learned a ton. The next sprint's going to be that much more successful. But more importantly, you only spent like a week or two doing it. And so, it's like, yeah, it's a failure, but in the long run, it's a tiny little thing that actually led to greater success.
Yeah, and it's the long run. That's the thing, because you guys are such a new, exciting 2-year company, where these are the times to be having those experience, so that you can, have a larger, more scalable platform in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then after you sold your company, or actually before, only because I love asking this question, it's my favorite question, is, so you're at a company, you sold it to LinkedIn after about 4 to 5 years. I always like asking one or two, like, super, what went wrong technology wise? Like, you always have to move fast. Something always breaks. Do you have any like epic good like failures on the technology front of something that failed that was good?
It's only good now, I'm sure. In the moment,
Yeah, they're only great now, but everybody goes through it at least once or twice.
You mean sort of like when we were just building the company at first, like pre-acquisition, or do you mean like as we were after acquired and trying to get it rebuilt?
Well, either one, but
yeah,
most of them
it's a
happened
horror
before
story.
that.
I want to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good question. I would actually argue that in the heightened case, in the sort of the pre-acquisition case, the big sort of epic failure, if you want to call it, wasn't a big epic failure, but the big fun failure to talk about was actually less about technology. I think we had an amazing team there of engineers, and really did some great stuff from a technology perspective. I think the failure there was actually more about we started the company with the idea that, like, we got to be so close to sales reps. Like, this product is for sales reps, and if we don't build it for sales reps, they're not going to use it. Like, if we build it for sales management, sales reps aren't going to want to use it because it won't really map to the way they work every day. And that was really something we talked about all the time. And actually we ended up getting pulled away from that. And when you start to go sell, it's one thing to talk about that and to build it, and then you start to go sell it, and like sales leadership's like, okay, that's cool, but what about all the stuff I need as a sales leader? And we sort of got pulled into this like trap, which a lot of startups do. And again, great learning experience, but we started to sort of make some shifts based on what the buyers were sort of pushing for, which isn't always a bad thing. And quite frankly, it kind of bombed in a way. I mean, again, big failure. To Kelly's point, like, we learned a ton, and we were able to turn it around and turn it into something really positive after the fact. But we learned very quickly that we were actually right in the first place. You go build a tool that's really designed for management and reporting and forecasting and sort of the data management aspects. And guess what? Sales reps are like, yeah, but that doesn't help me sell. Like, why am I going to use that? And it seems obvious now, but And so, again, we quickly were able to turn that around, and it actually almost made us double down on that original thought of like really being sales rep centric. So anyway, I mean, I would say that's the big one, and it wasn't so much about technology. It was just more about sort of not sticking to our like almost core values or core value prop that we knew we needed to. So definitely huge learning experience there.
I know this is a rabbit hole, but I'm just curious since you brought it up. So how did you get it back focused on the sales reps? Was it just showing the effectiveness of the tools you built for them?
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. So it's funny. It's like we sort of had a product that all of a sudden became really interesting to sales leadership. And they're like, yeah, I want to buy that. And well, guess what? They bought it. We got it implemented. We're sitting down with sales reps trying to get them, moving with it. And we quickly realized they didn't really want to use it, and so it was almost easy in a sense, where it was like it was so obvious. And so we realized that, yeah, we could sell it, but then if the reps really aren't going to adopt it, well, then they're not going to use it, and then management's not going to get the value, and then they're not going to renew. And so we sort of quickly had to pivot back and say, and actually the strategy changed a tiny bit in the sense that we had a lot more knowledge at that point about what leadership and management thought they could get out of the system. And so we actually kind of built a dual pronged approach in a way where we had a very sales rep centric aspect that I think they loved and they really valued. And then we were able to also translate that into some really powerful, interesting data that leadership could get out of it as well. And so almost like a multi-persona experience that really solved both problems at the same time was kind of the end output of all that. So,
well, and I bet you that experience ties a little bit to Mosaic too, of like trying to right now focus on the today customer, which is that financial suite, but then knowing that in the future those multiple prongs will come out, or they'll be able to evolve, or how to reach the other pieces of audience. So that's interesting.
It absolutely translates to a lot of the decision making we're doing here, right now at Mosaic, which is like, let's really focus on our core values and the core sort of users that we want to get engaged now, and then sort of slowly build off of that, and not just from a product perspective, but also from a market perspective, and sort of where are we going in the market, and then also which other personas across the organization, as I mentioned earlier, can we start to bring into the mix, whether it's sales or marketing or development, et cetera. So yeah, definitely. Again, to your point, Kelly, like all these little sort of failures, if you want to call them that, assuming you're paying attention and you're actually learning from them, they really add a ton of value to whatever comes next.
Right.
And just to close the loop, right after you left LinkedIn, where did you work next? And then what brought you to Mosaic after that?
Yeah, so I ended up actually going to DocuSign, which I went there because one of the senior executives that joined us at Heighton and really helped us run the company and drive the go-to-market strategy at Heighton prior to the LinkedIn acquisition, as well as our chairman of the board while we were at Heighton. They both joined DocuSign. So the chairman of the board ended up being the CEO at DocuSign, Dan Springer. He's there now. And then the person that was sort of helping us run the company and do some go-to-market work is their COO. So I was still really close with them, and we were still trying to figure out how we could work together again. And there was an opportunity to do some forward-looking sort of work at DocuSign. And so I ended up going there for a couple of years and working with them.
Awesome.
And then, sorry, so how did I get to Mosaic? Yeah, well, again, long story short, a woman that one of my favorite people in the world, actually, that works at Village Global, which is the VC that did the original seed at Mosaic. As soon as they invested in the company and she met the founders and she figured out what they were working on, she called me and said, look, like, this is perfect for you. You know the space so well. The founders are amazing. You got to meet them. And that was before the company was even formed. And so I met them through that connection and became an advisor right away. Spent about 8 months as an advisor, just kept getting more and more excited about the product and more excited about the founders. And at that time, they'd grown to about 10 people. And I just thought the team was amazing. And so after about 8 months of being an active advisor, ended up joining full time to just help them continue to grow the company and build out the more of the technology and product side of the house.
And so are you guys currently hiring for front end and back end people? It looked like maybe some data science as well.
Yeah, we're kind of hiring. I mean, it's kind of all of the above and plus plus. I mean, we're definitely hiring for really senior, mid-level, junior. We're kind of hiring on all the different sort of levels of experience across front end, back end. We're looking for some really experienced security centric people. We're looking for some quality focused people. More QA and automation stuff. We're looking for product managers. I mean, we're really hiring across the entire company right now. And just for some context there, so in the roughly 8 months that I've been in a full-time role there, we've gone from 12 to like 35 people. So there's just been a huge amount of growth, and it's all been very customer-driven growth. There's just a huge amount of momentum on the customer side. So lots of growth already, and we're probably going to get to 50 here by the end of the year. So yeah, lots of roles to fill.
One thing that really drives that, to your point about the customers, is because you're founders. Again, the founders are CFOs themselves. And so we always tell people it's kind of a double threat where you have a great product and you already have a customer base. Like it's Joe, Beige, and Brian's phones, quite literally. And I know you said when you first got there, you were kind of like, are these customers real, or are they just like the friends and family thing? But they're real businesses. They're real companies who are legitimately benefiting from this product. So I'm sure that was exciting for you to see too.
Yeah, definitely. And having those three founders there originally was huge because, we don't have a lot of customers yet. It's amazing to have people that can represent the customers internally so you can make great decisions about the product. They still obviously do that as founders, but the good news is we actually do have a big chunk of customers now that are actively engaged in the product development lifecycle and help. We're constantly talking to them. We have great relationships with them, and they're really helping us make great decisions about what we're doing from a product perspective.
And just to echo the customer thing, you guys have a list of some of your customers on your website, and they're all companies that everybody's going to know. The HubSpots, the Palantirs, Gustos, former CFOs of like Zendesk, Yahoo, Dropbox. I mean, you name it. Yep. It's a pretty impressive list of customers.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me. It's amazing actually how excited people can get about strategic finance. When you sort of, most people hear that and they're like, oh, okay. The reality is it's really interesting, and there's some really challenging, both mathematical, technical, user experience. Like the problems are big and very solvable, but they're very big and they're very challenging. And it's fun to solve hard problems, and there's a lot of those here to solve.
I can tell you, I was only in smaller startups that I've previously started, and it is a large pain point, even in a small company, to have to fill out the spreadsheets and the projections and pull in from all these different sources. It's a several week project, even in a small company.
Oh yeah. And do you want to be focused on that stuff, or do you want to be running your business? I mean, it's a big deal, especially for smaller startups.
So I'll focus on the web-based ones just because you guys are hiring across the board. I'll focus on just web stuff. So for the web devs, what is it that they'll be working on front end and back end? And what are some of those tools that you guys are using?
Yeah, so from a tools perspective, I think there's kind of two dimensions to that. So there's the right now and there's the like what's next. So right now, primarily we're sort of running in an AWS infrastructure, running with C# as the application layer, Postgres database, relational database, and Angular as a front end. That's the current. I think the one thing that's really important to note is that I definitely have a very strong best tool for the job mentality. And so we're actually going down the path of getting into a very heavy microservices oriented architecture, which will allow us to really pick the best tool for the job going forward. So it's C# and Angular today, but definitely down the road, you could imagine other, whether it's Java or Python or other backend technologies, as well as getting into tablet and mobile and other front end technologies, React or whatever the next big front end technology is. So definitely a lot of opportunity there to both work in Angular and C# and AWS, but also in the future, sort of sky's the limit on the different types of technology that we'll be supporting. And then as far as the types of problems, again, it's this interesting mix of, it really is like big data and not to use a buzzword, but like I shouldn't say big data. It's a lot of data to figure out how to get into the system and to normalize and to sort of connect together. So there's a lot of really interesting data scaling, performance, and then you start to get into like the data visualization aspects. Well, now you've got all this data, cool. Well, how do you bring that together and present it to the user in a way that the user can actually consume it and leverage it and use it to make incredibly smart business decisions, even just at the application layer, but then of course at the front end layer, right, too, the actual visuals and the data visualization there. So just a lot of challenges across the board from a technology perspective.
Well, and it's because of all your different customers and all their different systems, right? That's the customizable piece of it, of like, okay, we've got this customer, how are we going to ingest their data? How do we plug things in? How do we, like you said, manipulate it on the front end? It's different for each experience. So it's just so varied.
Yeah, in fact, that's a great point that I didn't even mention. I mean, there's another dimension to this problem, which is like all those things I just said, but then guess what? Every enterprise is a little bit different. And there's a lot of common stuff across them, but there's also a lot of stuff that's different. And so how do you build a truly metadata driven or configuration driven system that's incredibly dynamic, that every single customer can control themselves and decide how all that data fits together and how they're visualizing, and not do it in the sort of old school way of like, oh, well, you got to add code for customer X because customer X needs that. That's not an option, right? This is a true cloud like SaaS platform. It's got to be configuration driven. So some extreme challenges there as well, Kelly, with respect to what you just said and sort of supporting all those different use cases per customer.
You guys have a interesting data set in terms of being able to, let's say the data set was like 10 years old, right? You have so many insights across various industries of finance, right? And the external growth versus how they were using their capital. That's really interesting.
Yeah, in fact, I talk about it all the time when I'm talking to candidates, but nobody has that. I mean,
nobody does.
It just doesn't exist, right? Your data is spread across so many different systems, and yeah, you can kind of pull it out and you can kind of like construct that kind of a picture, but man, it's hard and it's stale immediately. And you construct it to answer a particular question, and then you've got another question. It's like, okay, well, now you got to reconstruct it in a different way. I mean, it's just not scalable at all. And so it really is the first time, I think, in the enterprise that truly you can get that picture of your business, both past, present, and future in a single place.
Yeah, the static piece of it versus being able to like make it real time or as close to.
I'm sure your data will be more accurate representation as well, because you're integrating it across various tools where there might be like a bias across certain tools that integrate with other platforms where it's like, well, only companies under 10 million use this one. Your
right.
Various integrations will kind of get a good sample size of all of company sizes.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of our, obviously a huge part of what we're doing is making sure that we're constantly both adding new systems, that are going to be relevant depending on the types of markets that we're going after, different ERP, CRM, HR, billing, payments. But also we're actually in the process of creating like a truly open bi-directional API. So even if you've got some homegrown proprietary system that you've built and you're storing, really important data, you can still get that into Mosaic and configure it to sort of fit within that 360-degree picture. So there really be no limitations of the types of data that you can get into our system over time.
I'm curious, what does your hiring process look like? I'm sure you've seen 101 different ways to hire engineers over the years. What's your hiring process for senior engineers for front end and back end positions?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's pretty straightforward, actually, given sort of some of the things I've seen. But basically, phone screen, right? First pass is just, do they feel like a really great cultural fit? Do they communicate well? Are they able to speak in detail about some of the complicated projects that they've worked on in the past? So sort of the things you would expect.
By the way, Luke, I have to tell you from the outside, that isn't something a lot of people give you. Like you don't actually get access to the head of engineering in the first round. A lot of companies shoot out a hacker rank and wait to see if someone's invested, or they send you to HR. So I want people to hear, like, it's actually Luke that takes the time out of his insanely hectic calendar. I mean, we've had to like dig to find times for him to speak to candidates, but he makes the time, and he really is. I mean, you really are invested in their experience. So it's not to go unnoted.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, yeah, it's a good point. I didn't mention that. Like, I do all the phone screens right now, and that probably won't scale forever, but it's really important to me. And it gets back to what we were talking about before about like, you got to have the right people to be in these like really autonomous, like self-driven teams, outcome-oriented environment. Like, you got to have the right people. And I have this thing I talk about where like everybody's a leader at Mosaic. It doesn't matter if you're a high school intern or a 30-year veteran, in tech. Everybody's a leader, and it may not mean you have HR responsibility, but you have to be able to lead, whether it's a project of just yours or a larger project. And so, just trying to make sure that we're getting the right people into the pipe. I like to do those first phone screens, and then the second piece is a like more of a technical, like what I would call a traditional technical interview, where you'll actually meet 2 or 3 front end or back end engineers, or both, depending on the role. And their job is to try to go deep with you and just make sure that your technical experience is a really good match for the types of problems and challenges that we have to solve. And assuming that goes well, third round actually is kind of fun for most candidates, at least from what I've heard, which is it's meet some founders, get some product demos, learn more about what we're thinking, sort of where the company's going. It really is more an opportunity for the candidate to just learn a ton about our team and our company, and make sure that this is the other thing I always talk about, like, it's got to be bi-directional. Like, yeah, candidates typically are in this mode where they have to convince the company that they're great. Well, that's true, but I actually look at it the other direction too. Like, we have to convince the candidates that we're great. Like, right, both the candidate has to really want to be here. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. And so we put a lot of effort into that third round and making sure that they have all the information that they need to make a really intelligent decision about their future.
Yeah, the other feedback I've gotten is that whole process is very transparent. Whether you're lifting up the hood on the third round, or you're being honest about what you're looking for, or the team's giving them a good glimpse of like their personality and their style. Like, nobody walks away being like, I didn't get to ask questions, or I'm not sure what they're like. Like, everyone feels really good at like just wanting to be transparent.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in transparency. It's like, you're going to find out the bad stuff. If we don't tell you the bad stuff now, you're going to find it out later. So like, let's just be honest about it, and then we can all just kind of move forward and try to get some great work done.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we did not cover about Mosaic that you would want to share with everybody?
I mean, I think you guys did an excellent job actually of asking the right questions to hit a lot of those key pieces.
I have one more.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead.
Because it always helps selfishly to hear this from you. And I think getting a chance to promote this to other people to hear from you directly. Can you explain the data and or data visualization experience, not just from a technology standpoint, Angular, C#, but like really giving people a glimpse of like the type of experience you're hoping they come with, or that will apply to the platform? Because Jeff, one thing that Luke and I have really been trying to hit is finding candidates with that transferable product experience, which is just very niche. So maybe giving just people a quick heads up of like how you see that, or what maybe you screen for, will help them identify if they could be a match.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, once you get past the baseline of all the stuff we talked about, like, are they a great cultural fit? Do we feel like they're set up for success, based on the types of challenge? Once you get past that, yeah, I mean, I actually put it into 2 different buckets. One bucket is, I like to find candidates that fit into one of 2 buckets. One of those buckets could be just really deep experience in like a really complicated enterprise SaaS product. And I'm actually not picky about whether it was ERP or CRM or HR. It really doesn't matter, because there's a lot of similarities across all those things when you think about sort of the complexity of managing these configuration-driven data models and sort of the experiences that the users have across all these different types of flows within the application, and how all those pieces fit together, and the challenges of scaling a system, infrastructure and security and performance. complicated enterprise business software, to me, like that sort of checks the box if you've been in that kind of environment, for both front end and back end. And then the second bucket, and I don't mean you'd have to have both, I mean like one or the other, is like a more, what I would call like a more core data visualization experience. Again, front end or back end, because there's equally interesting challenges on both sides, where you've dealt with products that are dealing with large data sets, where each individual customer is sort of tweaking their experience to get the data they need out of the system to answer complicated questions and do visualizations, whether it's charts or graphs or heat maps. It doesn't really matter. But again, large data sets, very customizable, complicated data relationships within those data sets. And then again, the ability for the end user to actually do some kind of visualization around them. And it doesn't matter which library you're using and all that stuff, really. It's just more, do you understand the challenges of delivering it and scaling it, and sort of the user side of what works and what doesn't work from a user perspective. So those are the two big buckets.
Perfect.
If you use 10 plus joint statements in the same SQL statement, then those are always the complex queries where you're just like, what is going on right now? Where you have to draw it out on the whiteboard.
That's a lot of joins. Yes.
To clarify, are you guys hiring remotely, or do they have to be at one of your offices, or how's that currently work and going to work in the future?
Yeah, so Mosaic was actually started with the idea that we were going to be a pretty remote, very remote friendly, and just generally kind of remote company. So the idea was, so the company was founded in San Diego. We obviously have a physical presence there. We just moved into a really nice, brand new space. Space is a little cheaper right now.
San Diego, it's over in One Paseo, or across the way from One Paseo, but it's over in Del Mar. It is a great location.
Yeah. So we have an office there, but the idea was always to be able to get the best people we could find, kind of no matter where they are. But I think generally speaking, what you're going to find is we'll probably have a group in the San Francisco Bay Area, well, obviously a group in San Diego, a group in like the San Francisco Bay Area, maybe Seattle, maybe Austin, and then probably have some hubs there, an actual place for people to go into the offices there over time. But at the same time, we find people all over. I mean, we've got people on the East Coast, we've got people in the middle of the country, we've got somebody in Brazil. We really just have a mentality of, let's go find the best possible people that we actually really want to work with, because we actually want to have fun at work too. And like, let's just go get them. But they do tend to be concentrated in those areas that I mentioned anyway. So I think you'll find hubs in those areas, and it'll be entirely up to the individual team members. Some people want to go into the office 5 days a week. Some people only want to go 1 day a week. And for us, it's very outcome centric. Again, I mean, I keep coming back to that, but if you are working awesome at home and that's where you're most productive, please like go work at home. At the same time, we're going to make sure we have a significant chunk of budget set aside so that everyone will be encouraged to come to the offices as often as they would like, to get real face time with, real human beings, once that's actually possible, which hopefully is soon now.
I actually have one more question. I'm sorry for running a little long, Jeff. I get excited about these. Can you explain or give a couple examples or stories of how you've been able to build the culture, kind of keeping that remote component in mind? I know the Encinitas team has done like Taco Tuesdays, and they've had beers at the office, and when the presence was there a little bit more, but yeah. How do you see it happening, or what are you intentional about?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I mean, the reality is it's a really hard problem, and I don't know that anybody's truly nailed it. We're all sort of still learning and experimenting to some degree with the challenges that it has brought. But yeah, I mean, we go to a lot of trouble, and we're still, we're iterating and learning, but we do every Friday morning, we call it a coffee talk, where the whole company comes together, and we do a bunch of random things, whether somebody's presenting about their hobbies or showing pictures of a trip or just throwing out a topic and just random conversations. But the point is like getting everybody together every week, and it's not the same as being in person, but again, it's just, trying to get as close to that as possible. So, and that's great. We do about once a month, roughly, we actually do like company events, where we've done like a custom Jeopardy game that was built for Mosaic, where we had teams and everybody was competing to try to win at Jeopardy. We did a scavenger, like a virtual scavenger hunt. And I'm actually like, I honestly, like at first I was a little skeptical about some of these things, because I've actually never had to do that before in my career. But they've just gone extremely well. And I've been really impressed by the team's ability to both set them up and execute them, but also the participation. And so, we're going to keep doing that. A lot of these like virtual events and weekly chats that we bring people together. We just have a really collaborative and communicative Scrum and Agile culture too. Like you come to our like product development related meetings and people are talking about personal stuff and joking, and it's just that kind of environment. So there's a really good connection between people, even though virtual. So anyway, we're still evolving. Like we're still trying all kinds of new things and trying to get better on all those fronts. But I think we've done a pretty good job of moving the ball forward in that area.
Very cool.
All right. Anything else you want to say about Mosaic?
No. I mean, all I would say is that for anybody that's watching and thinking, like, even if you're not sure if like enterprise SaaS or strategic finance or any of these things we've talked about is for you, I would say if you just you love an amazing team and people that are really passionate and driven and genuinely friendly and professional and mature. And you want to go work on some really hard problems and sort of change the landscape in enterprise software to some degree. Again, a lot of this is novel. Let's chat. Like, don't worry if you're sure or not. We'll find out, real quick just through a conversation if it's a good fit.
Where's the best place to reach out to you or your team or whoever?
Yeah, I mean, you can reach out. Probably just reach out to Kelly directly is probably the right place to start. Kelly, would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, we'd say LinkedIn, but I guess the imaginary fear is 100 people message you on LinkedIn, but you're really responsive anywhere. So we'll get in touch.
Any of those things are fine. Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Luke.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me. It was great.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Chasing Squirrels. Today's episode is brought to you by Proven Recruiting. As an agency, Proven has helped thousands of technology professionals find new opportunities at exciting companies across the United States. They focus on the quality over quantity approach in terms of building lasting relationships with both their candidates and clients. Thanks again, and don't forget to subscribe.